Otherworldly visitors, what we know to be aliens today, getting construed every single day, mishmashed with the gospel. Jesus is being called an alien. God the Father is being called an alien, including his name Yahweh, literally getting drawn into the alien crowd now. The ET religion is growing by the day. We discussed that last week, but what we specifically want to dive into today is the theological incompatibilities of Christ and the who, what, when, where, and why, based on the biblical narrative that we can glean about who aliens really are, where they come from, what occurred in our history that would have made them feel invited onto our terrain. To speak with me once again this week on the topic, welcome back, Brittany Jackson.
Thanks, good to be here.
We talked last week about the C-spot run or the once upon a time. And I want to go there because a lot of people are still kind of caught up in this idea that there's a Sethite theory. We discussed that last week. If you didn't see last week's episode, you can go back and watch that. I did not delve very deeply into the Sethite theory versus the fallen angel human hybrid theory.
Right.
I didn't go in to parse all of that. All I can say is that if you want to know the God's honest truth, is that our human history did not even recognize the Sethite theory until a very recent time. It is a very young theory. Prior to that, the only way that the Bible could have been read was the way they were interpreting it at the time of Christ in the first few centuries following, which said, yes, God created angels, and then some of them rebelled. Not all of them, but some of them rebelled.
Right.
And when they did, they became warped. Again, the Sethite theory relies very heavily on this idea that Jesus in the book of Matthew said that the angels in heaven do not marry. Well, marry in biblical language, it's not just signing a piece of paper that says, now pronounce you man and wife and you can kiss the bride. The word marry in biblical language links to the idea of consummation.
Right.
So when Jesus says that the angels in heaven do not consummate like we humans do, people say, okay, well, there you go. There's no way that Genesis 6 can be talking about angels that have copulated with human women. The key words here are in heaven. Jesus is talking about the holy angels that have not fallen yet. Angels in heaven
Right.
do not marry. Okay. What about the angels outside of heaven? What about the angels that, according to Jude 1:6 and 2 Peter, who literally were hurled down and away from heaven? They lost their heavenly estate. They abandoned their heavenly estate in trade for trying to be the Most High, trying to usurp the authority of God. They fell, they twisted, they warped, they became something different. And now, when you rewind all the way back to the very, very, very beginning of time, and you're looking at Adam and Eve, you know that you've got these fallen angels. One of them, a lot of people want to say Lucifer was specifically a fallen angel, and he was the leader of all of them. We could get into a diatribe on that very quickly and try to figure out who the main bad guy of the earliest times were. If you're talking to Derek Gilmer, he's going to tell you it was Shemiyaza. We could have that conversation, but
Right.
the bottom line, for the sake of simplicity, let's just say it was Lucifer. That Lucifer was the ultimate supreme, choir director angel, and he fell. And he took a third of the angels with him. That's a Revelation narrative is where that comes from. It's not necessarily what all scholars believe, that it was literally a third. But regardless of that, that's what the church teaches.
A large number of them basically fell.
A large number of them did. And so if you go back to the very beginning of time and you look at what these fallen angels were doing, they were trying to usurp the authority and the power of God. Once they hear that there is going to be some kind of a child that's going to be brought into the earth at some point that's going to be holy God and holy man at the same time, and he's going to do something that's redemptive for all of humanity. Don't you think that it's exactly in their nature and in their agenda, within their agenda, to try to warp that bloodline so that the
Right.
Messiah could not be born? Yes, the angels in heaven do not marry. Correct. Now, separate yourself from that and moving on to a completely different and unrelated topic. The angels who fell from heaven would absolutely do whatever they got to do, including copulate with human women to try to thwart the bloodline of the Messiah. So
Right.
now you have this moment, Genesis 6, where fallen angels have taken unto themselves human women and copulated, and now you have an offspring that is part fallen angel, part human, and they are called the NEPHILIM. In the Bible, they are called giants.
Right.
The men of old, the men of renown. Now, what that is, if you look up the men of old, the men of renown, the giants, if you look up that string of words and you look at what the ancients described, you will see that they are mentioning specifically, in some cases, the gods and goddesses of the ancient pantheon. Have we arrived at aliens yet? Not quite. Now we have what is on the earth as the NEPHILIM. So I'm going back to the sea spot run once upon a time. God created angels. Some of them fell. They procreated with human women. And we have this strange offshoot of an abomination, frankly, that just should not even exist.
Right.
What happens when the flood occurs and all of the Nephilim, or at least what most scholars would agree to be all of the Nephilim at the time, were wiped out? What happened to the soul? What happened to the spirit that was within them? That is the origin of demons. When I first heard that, I thought, there's no way. I mean, all of my childhood, I had been taught not by my father,
If
but
you know
just by
Dr.
church.
Thomas Horn, you know it wasn't him.
Yeah. But I had been taught, like in Sunday school and stuff, that fallen angels and demons were the same thing. And so when I read this for the first time, that the origin of demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim of Genesis 6, I was like, oh. But then I got to looking at it, and I realized after reading Angels and Demons, that's not one work, that's two works by Dr. Michael Heiser. And keep in mind, Dr. Michael Heiser was not only a theologian and an unbelievable scholar of his time, but he was also fluent in Greek, Hebrew, and not just Greek and Hebrew, but the obsolete dialects that were in use in certain parts of the world that literally are completely unknown in most areas of even biblical scholarly work. He was fluent in many of those ancient languages. This is what he did, was he studied and he reported what's really going on in certain aspects. And he got to looking at some of these things and he's like, bing, there you go. That is where the demons came from. The demons were the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim that were destroyed in the flood. So once you destroyed the body, where does the spirit go? That's why demons are invisible. That's why they float around, whatever. Okay.
Could you also explain that for ghosts?
Yeah. Now, this is where the alien question comes in. Are the aliens fallen angels? Maybe some of those that have not been bound at the bottom of Euphrates or whatever. Just fallen angels, or are they some kind of perhaps demonic presence that is an offshoot of some kind of DNA manipulation like was practiced in Genesis 6:4? That I can't be entirely certain, but I will tell you, based on everything I've read of Mike Heiser, it seems very clear. The theology points to the idea that an alien is a fallen angel. Now the church, this is where they respond, no. Angels fell one time. They never fell again. They just the once. They did it the once, and then they never did it again. Well, okay, where in the Bible does it say that? Quite to the contrary, it gives us a record of 3 different times that they fell. The first was in the Garden of Eden with the Nakash, or the serpent, not a snake. But anyway, in Genesis 3, at the fall of mankind. Okay, that was fall account number 1. Fall account number 2 is when the angel hybrid offspring was produced through the union of fallen angel and human women in Genesis 6. And then fall number 3 was when the angels who were delegated to watch over humanity at the Babel confusion. Okay, we read about this in Genesis 11, but we also get more specific in Deuteronomy 32:8. These angels also rebelled. They failed in being able to watch over humanity in the way that they were supposed to. And this leads to the courtroom scene of God presiding as judge over these fallen angels in Psalm 82. So we have at least 3 different times where an angel has utilized their own free will to go against God. So what is an alien? Can it not be a fallen angel because they all fell once and God dealt with them and then that done, we're done? No, it's absolutely possible that angels could at any given point in time utilize their free will to usurp the authority and power of God, go their own way, and become something very warped, wicked, and evil. And I'm not surprised that whenever aliens show up on the scene, people walk away feeling the hostile fear, not the reverential one.
Right.
Occasionally they do. And we can chalk that up very easily it's so easy. Satan himself can appear as an angel of light. So can a satanic, something that is very evil in nature, such as an alien, show up and appear to be your big space brother and that we all need to, sing Kumbaya and sing songs? Yeah, that is possible.
Right.
Very possible. That is why occasionally some people will walk away from an abduction account and say that these were good guys.
Right.
But it's much, much, much more likely most people walk away going, I was scared out of my mind. I was terrified. I've lost sleep over this.
Or bad things happen to them during that encounter. They're being experimented on. They have their memory wiped. They come back and they have some implant in their leg or their arm or their neck that they can't explain. They take it to doctors. They can't explain. It's never a good ending to the encounter, usually.
Right. So therefore, aliens are some sort of a fallen angel origin abomination. Something that belonged to what was originally of God's creation and comes from and stems from God's creation. And that is why we can still apply the Bible verses that say that everything that exists because he made it.
Right. They just chose to rebel against him and make their own creations, basically.
Right. And so they wanted to play God, and that is where we part ways, where what they are in their current form is very warped from what God created them. So therefore, they are not our space brothers. Now, despite this clear once upon a time C-spot run theological breakdown, there are still folks that would continue to contribute the nature of Christ to the nature of alien. And they will confuse those things. Now, look, when they do this, it initially makes sense. People that have not studied Christian theology, I really don't blame them for taking the supreme character, if I might call him that, of Christianity and blanket statementing over here that he is of alien status at some point. Because look, then all of the New Testament account makes sense. Calming storms is just simply a higher intelligence over weather and atmosphere.
Right.
All he needs to know is how to manipulate our universe based on mastery and intelligence and technology. Physical healings and resurrection, that is mastery over human biology, even his own. Appearing and disappearing at will, or remote miracles that he did where he wasn't even there in person, like the nobleman's son. Instantaneous miracles of something that has to happen rapidly in the moment. All of that could be seen as mastery over dimensions.
Even Jesus' ascension back to heaven, you could, if you don't understand the story, an alien ship came and picked him up.
Right. Oh, for sure. Yes. All of this could be seen as mastery over dimensions, such as time, space, distance. It could also be knowledge that we don't have over, interdimensional travel, such as wormholes or portals. It gets further and further away from God's supernatural sovereignty over natural law. It becomes more of a technological intelligence question. Right. Water into wine could be seen as mastery over chemistry and thermodynamics. Since we know so little about aliens and what they can do and what their intelligence actually is, other than what the Bible describes, which is purely malevolent, everything that Christ did in the New Testament could be chalked up to some kind of deeper level of knowledge or mastery or technology manipulation over natural law. Now, all of it works until you get into comparing the natures. Now, this is a little bit what we've touched on so far, but just as a really quick refresher for those of you that are kind of just new and joining it, angels are created beings. Jesus is eternal.
Right.
Jesus did not have a beginning. He had an incarnation into a human body.
Right.
But Jesus himself is eternal. This is what the world of theology refers to as the hypostatic union, but whatever God is, Jesus is that.
Yeah.
So even if he condescends his own nature and incarnates himself into a human body for the purposes of becoming the Lamb, the Passover lamb for all of our sins forever, and making it so that now we can access the throne room of God, not just in the afterlife, but in prayer now. We no longer need the priest or the Holy of Holies room or any of that. God, right. the veil was torn. That's what Jesus did. But whatever God is, in a hypostatic union, Jesus is that. So he is eternal. He shares the Father's eternality. So if, as we know from Genesis 6, that there is something wicked this way comes going on with all of the fallen angels and how they're able to interact with and manipulate human beings the way that they did in Genesis 6, I think what we're looking at every time we see an alien, and I don't care if they are an alien gray with the big bulbous head and the big black eyes. I don't care if they are, like I said earlier, a perfect, beautiful, blonde, white-skinned Nordic straight off Zeta Reticuli, or some kind of a reptilian, or a little green man, whatever they are, whatever it is that we think of when we see alien, that these are fallen angelic beings in some variety that can manipulate humankind. Jesus would have to be an angel if he was an alien. Because if aliens are fallen angels, or at least some of the fallen angel variety of offspring in some way or other, then Jesus would have to have been some kind of child of an angel. Now, this absolutely strips him of his divinity, and it goes against everything that the Bible says.
Right.
So there's that first, is that angels are created beings, and therefore Jesus can't be one of them.
Well, that means he's not the Son of God.
Right. We also run into this hiccup. If you read Colossians 2:18 and then over in Revelations 19:10 and 22:9, the Bible is very clear that we are not to worship angels. And yet we are repetitiously told to worship Jesus. So if aliens are originally angels and Jesus is therefore an angel and therefore an alien, you see how this gets really complicated, but it comes right back around to the beginning. Why would we be told to worship him? We're not allowed to worship aliens, fallen or holy. So we would not be told to worship Jesus if he was of alien nature. There's also the abduction accounts. When you comparing nature to nature here, like you said earlier, you've got these weird experiments. A lot of people are coming out of these things, out of these abduction accounts. And again, listen to me at home. I beseech you, you don't have to believe in the alien abduction accounts. These people do. That's the issue here. When these people come out of the alien abduction account, one of the first things that they say was, oh, they experimented on me.
Right.
They planted a chip in me, or I came out and there was a wiry little coil thing stuck up my nose. That's straight out of the Manhattan abduction thing that they just released on Netflix the other day.
Or they just drop you off in the middle of nowhere and you've been gone for days. You have time gaps in what happened to you. You're scared too. Your family usually notices that you were missing.
But the idea that experiments would be conducted on us for the benefit of some higher knowledge or some higher power out there to be able to study us and see what makes us tick. God, again, the Father, hypostatic union with the Son. Jesus knows exactly what makes us tick, how the human body works.
Yeah.
He knows exactly those things. Why would they have any interest in seeing what makes us tick or putting a chip in us to see what it does? All of these experiments and even some of the more dramatic stories, which I find slightly less credible, are the ones that say I walked away pregnant, or they put a fetus in me or whatever, and I was pregnant for 2 months and then all of a sudden I was abducted again and it was taken out and I've got this scar to prove it and all these different things. Why? God made the human being. He made the human body. Well, that doesn't even make any sense.
He doesn't need to study something he created.
Right. And then there's the free will restrictions. How many times in abduction accounts have you heard people say, I was on a gurney, I couldn't move my arms or legs, I couldn't speak. All I could do was think, and I was telepathically bombarded by these beings that were hovering over me, and I was thinking, and they could read my mind and all this stuff. God is not going to remove your free will at any given point in time. Your free will is his intrinsically irreversible gift to humanity. I studied holiness once in college, and when you get deep into the study of God being 100% all holy, you realize early on that God could not have been holy unless he gave us free will. And now that we have free will and we often use it to create pain and do horrible, evil things to other people, now the world has pain and then everybody wants to blame God and say, why, God, why? When it's something he cannot stop. Some people will say, why didn't God stop that? And sometimes, of course, there is supernatural intervention where we pray. Christian so-and-so will pray, God, protect me.
Right.
And I believe that he sent an angel that did that very thing, which blocked this travesty from happening or whatever. But for the most part, free will is accounted for. You cannot remove it. God is holy. He gives free will. He will not take it away. So if you're strapped to a gurney and you cannot speak and you cannot move your arms and legs, that's not God, and it is not of God. Angels are ministering spirits. We read this in Hebrews 1:14. And yet, when angels appear on the scene in a lot of places in the Bible, the first thing that they say is fear not. So we know that they are fearsome creatures. Whether they show up looking like a man or they show up looking some other way, we know they are fearsome. I would go back to, this is an argument of what kind of fear. Do you fear the reverential fear, or do you fear a hostile fear? Like, this thing is going to steal my soul and give it to Satan. Like, do you feel that?
Yeah, it's going to hurt you.
Or do you fear like, oh my gosh, I better not mess with this thing because whatever it is, it's powerful. There's a difference between a reverential fear. And if they're ministering spirits, then they are not going to impose the wrong kind of fear. Holy angels will always pass the test of the spirits. Every time. If they are a holy angel and they are of the kingdom of God, if you read 1 John 4, you get it. There is a way to test the spirits that are speaking to you.
Right.
And you can do that by simply giving the question, who do you say Jesus is? Now, if it is a holy angel, they are going to start preaching the gospel.
Right.
He is who he said he was. He is the Son of God. He is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. There is none higher than Jesus. That's the gospel. That's what you're going to get from a holy angel.
And they wouldn't be upset with you asking that.
No.
They would
In fact,
expect it.
they would hope that you would.
Right.
Before just listening to any spirit that comes along to tell you this, that, or the other thing. But this is ironically where we get into some of the things that have been said in alien abductions accounts. The outright denial of Christ's divinity. Every once in a while, you have these people, they bring up Jesus when they're in the middle of some kind of an abduction account, and these beings will outrightly deny the divinity of Christ. They'll say, oh yeah, he was a great man. Just a man. But he was great.
Yeah.
Or there will be an outright denial of that he ever existed at all, or something to that nature. They will teach New Age doctrines, false teachings like panspermia, or the idea that life was seeded on Earth by some intergalactic visitor in the ancient days. Sometimes they demand worship. Again, remember, you cannot worship, and a holy angel will reject it. This is where I get down to the absolute very bottom line. If you haven't gotten anything else we've said up to this point, hear me say this now. Jesus is the number one name that has delivered people from a constant repetitious abduction account. The terrorizing in the night, the I don't know where I went for 2 days, the I woke up in the woods, the I have something planted in my leg, all of these things, the I floated out my window, the lights in the sky, this terrorizing that these people have said has happened to them. The number one thing, read the research done by Joe Jordan on this subject. The number one thing that delivers these people from this malady is the name of Jesus Christ. If Jesus is an alien, then he is of the kingdom of aliens. And a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Jesus said that in Mark 3. So either he's of the kingdom of aliens and he is an alien and he's one of the good guys, or he is not.
Right.
But what he can't do is be the name that casts out aliens. Satan cannot cast out Satan, Jesus says in Mark 3. So Jesus cannot cast out Jesus. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Jesus' name would not be the authority that delivers people from aliens if he was an alien.
Right.
Bottom line, there is no way to backtrack. There's no other way to look at it. Jesus, it is a theological impossibility that Jesus could be of the kingdom of aliens. There is one exception, because I know that there's a couple of people that are going to be sitting there watching and they're going to say, oh, wait a minute, I heard about that one. There have been a couple of exceptions in the Joe Jordan cases where a person does call on the name of Jesus, but they're not delivered. Later in every single case, they were questioned. Well, who do you say Jesus is? What is Jesus to you? Oh, he was like this tragic prophet and he died because the Romans didn't like him. Or, oh, Christ consciousness. We are all one and God is all one with us and we are all part of Jesus. It's not the Son of God as the Bible describes. Right. So what they are calling out to, God knows. God knows your heart. He knows when you are calling out the name. It's not just the utterance of a sound.
Right.
It's the invocation of a power. He knows whether or not you are going to be the kind of person that the next day is going to adhere to the biblical Christ, give your life over to him, and be saved. And so you can't expect that God is going to simply respond to the utterance of a certain collection and conglomeration of consonants and vowels. It's not a magic trick. It's not a formula.
Right.
You have to be calling on the biblical Jesus Christ, and when they do, they are delivered. So there really is no exception after you take that into consideration. Lastly, before we wrap this up, I want to bring to everybody's attention that there is a very, 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 very dangerous word game going on in the ET religion circles today. They start word gaming this little ploy that introduces a deception and nobody sees it. It appears, at least, that nobody sees it for what it is. A contronym. Most people don't really know off the top of their head what a contronym is, or they, remember it from high school or something. But a contronym is ironically a word that can mean its own opposite. Now, sometimes it just naturally does, like fast. Can be to move quickly, or it can be like with fasting from food. It can be to stop completely. So there are words that just from the beginning of the word, they are a contronym, but there's also etymological contronyms, ones that started meaning this, and then over languages have evolved with the human race over time, they come to mean something completely different. It's similar when it comes to extraterrestrial and alien, those words, specifically those terms, because etymologically and originally, the words did not mean little green men, bulbous-headed alien grays, Zeta Reticuli, the reptilians, or the things that fly around in UFOs. It didn't mean any of that. Originally, the word extraterrestrial technically simply meant living or occurring outside of Earth or its atmosphere. Now, God is not apart from the Earth. He is here also, but he's not limited to our terra firma. To our terrestrial location. So because God is not limited to Earth, then by definition, he could be seen or viewed as extraterrestrial. The other one, alien, technically means different or adverse in nature. Again, God is not limited to our substance, our character, our nature, and our conditions of life. So because of that, we could look at that and say, technically, God is an alien. Now, this is a wonderful word game. I'm so happy, not happy, for all of the people out there that are pointing this out, that God is now by default an alien. Listen, you know darn well that when you hear extraterrestrial and alien, that we're talking about those things flying, those UFOs out there.
Right.
You know that's what the word means now. It's like awful 200 years ago versus awful today. Extraterrestrial and alien hundreds of years ago, when it first became a part of the English language, would have meant something that is apart from us or something that is just out there. Now it means the little green guys.
Right.
And we know that. So these people that know that, they're playing a dangerous word game because they are using the original definition to paint the idea that God looks like what we think of those words today.
Right.
And there have been full books, DVDs, docuseries, one that is I will not give the title because I don't want anybody to read this garbage, but it literally goes as far as to say God himself called himself an alien and starts listing the verses of how he paints himself as an extraterrestrial. I'm sorry, but we know when we say those words, that's not what we're talking about.
Right. And it's almost disrespectful.
Well, it's just the grandest of all deceptions. It's a word game. The word gamiest of all word games. These words have become their own contronyms.
Right.
They no longer mean what we originally thought they meant, and we know that when we say that, that's what we're referring to. In the book, Destination Earth, Ancient Aliens, the Ancient of Days, and the Ancient Plot to Hybridize Humanity, and it's available in audio format. Jonathan Welsh did the audio book. And Jonathan Welsh, if you hear him, oh my gosh, he's amazing. He's British. He's great. He's extremely scholarly. The book was written by myself, Donna Howell, also Allie Anderson, helping to understand how the masses are being psychologically groomed to embrace the idea of ET visitors as gods or God cumulatively. And of course, Derek Gilbert takes the history, how, everything from sci-fi to the JFK assassination to the Tic Tac UFO UFO of 2017, how all these little things have been interlinked and interwoven in our society to paint the Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley picture.
Right.
These people who are leading occultists who have dabbled in the dark arts, a lot of them comes straight from the occult. It all leads back to the grand deception, and the word game matters. This is the word game that they are playing. And so I dedicated one chapter to asking the scholars, is God an alien? Now listen, I did this on purpose. When I reached out to these scholars, I did not give them any context. I just said, is God an alien? Well, of course, they weren't surprised that I asked this. Had they been anyone else, they would have been like, is he what? What did you just say? But because
they expect those kind of questions from Donna.
yes. But I didn't give any context. I didn't say why I was asking or what the book was. I just said yes or no. Is God an alien? And tell me why. And so they all answered the question. But it's funny because I did not have to explain the word trap to them. Every one of them got back to me and said, hang on a minute. What do you mean by alien and extraterrestrial? Are you talking about the original etymological meaning of these words? Or are you talking about what we think aliens are today?
Yeah.
Because those are two different things. They caught the trap. And I didn't tell them it was coming.
Yeah.
I didn't say, please help me, forge this argument. I just said, is God an alien? Every single one of them said, you have to define what you mean by that before you can ask me that question. Now, then they went on. If you mean this, then yes or no. If you mean this, then yes or no. And every single one of them got back and it converged into a beautiful thing. I couldn't have asked for a better chapter 4. So one of the chapters in this book specifically says, is God an alien? And then it lets the scholars speak for themselves. My favorite answer was from Derek Gilbert. Because he said, no, the word alien represents something that is adverse in nature, and we are God's image bearers. And when we sin, we are the ones who knowingly and willingly alienate ourselves from God and his holiness.
Wow.
So he flipped it, and I didn't see that coming because I'd never
We're the
heard that
aliens.
before. But it was like, whoa, we are the aliens now. That's essentially what Derek Gilbert did. And so when you want to play word games, I promise you, bring it, because there's a scholar like Derek Gilbert out there somewhere who's going to flip that on its head and say, yeah, but didn't you know? Oh, honey, didn't you know?
Right.
It just got a lot more complicated.
Right.
So I hope that in writing Destination Earth, me, Derek Gilbert, and Allie Anderson made Thomas Horn proud. I hope that we brought justice to his original idea, and that the conversation that started with me emailing him and saying, a very good friend of mine that knows the Bible is wondering whether Jesus could be an alien, that was able to shift into something that can now be a tool for generations to come. Because I will tell you, the whole book is not C-spot run, but that is where we started because we want people to get the answer and be able to reiterate it fast. So pick your favorite parts, take screen grabs, do whatever you got to do, but get that information in you. If you have to, I don't care how stupid you feel, stand in front of a mirror and practice this, reiterate it, get ready to answer the question because the ET religions of tomorrow are coming. They absolutely will say that Jesus is an alien and we need to be prepared to answer that question. Meanwhile, if you'd like to get your hands on the book, I'm not trying to sell you anything, but if you want to get your hands on a copy of the book, it's available in 3 formats: print, electronic book, and audio. Or you can direct your browsers to skywatchtvstore.com where you can get your copy, print in a bundle with some other neat giveaways. Thank you for tuning in to the Donna Howell Show. We'll see you next week.